Night school.
Night school.
So we just ran outside because it started, we were like 3 minutes into recording and then it reeked of smoke. And so we went out there and Dairy Queen is on fire across the street.
And it has not stopped the people in line.
No, people are still going through the line.
Looks that
and
way.
then there was a cop pulling up, putting his sirens on. And I feel like he might have been putting his sirens on, like doing crowd control, like getting everybody to
Guys, get out of here.
stop. Like,
There's a current fire.
does that mean that there's people inside just making food? Like,
They might be. It might be.
and they're like turning over the blizzards and they're falling out because it's fucking melting. So we're talking about this episode is going to be on the nature of consciousness by Rupert Spira. It's a book that expresses a very simple idea in many different ways, and so we're going to treat it in kind of a broad way and talk about whatever we want in the same episode, including Maharishi, because Maharishi is a yogi guy who founded a university and invented or discovered or taught, whatever you want to call it, the Transcendental Meditation technique, which we were just talking about before Dairy Queen caught on fire.
Yeah.
So to dive into that shit, I'm all accepted and like loan agreement signed and everything to go to that university for a bachelor's program in consciousness and human potential. Or it's technically like a bachelor's of arts with a specialization in consciousness and human potential. But like every single class has the word consciousness in it. It's so weird. Like every class is like physics and technology of consciousness, consciousness and yoga philosophy. And it's called a consciousness-based education. Like that's what they call their approach to education.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into exactly what Maharishi's founding philosophy was behind the school. Like I don't know exactly how his philosophy translated into the style of education, and so I got more to learn about it, but I'm excited about it. I've been trying Transcendental Meditation, although not technically, because they are comically elitist about having to be trained by a certified instructor in Transcendental Meditation. As far as I understand it, as an untrained amateur practitioner, is that you close your eyes for 20 minutes and you sub-vocally or mentally repeat a mantra that is 3 syllables and doesn't have any like definition or meaning, like not words, but that are just nice sounds. And doing that allows you to transcend your normal state of consciousness and experience something a little deeper or a little different. And I had an experience with Transcendental Meditation 2 days ago, on Saturday morning, that was really crazy. So I want to tell you about it, and it'll relate to the stuff that this book talks about too.
Sweet.
So a few minutes into the meditation, the sounds that I made up were Ba-je-yu, I think, or Ba-ja-yu, or something like that.
Don't you now have to come up with different ones?
Like you're not supposed to say it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that's a thing.
I don't give a fuck. I mean, I'm the type of person that like goes to a church just to argue with the people at the church about their ideas, and I'm going to be the exact same with this Maharishi shit. Like if they're like, it's a secret 3-syllable sound, you can't tell anybody, I'm just going to go like put it on blast. Like I think it's all so elite and ridiculous. Like if it's true, this yogi or Western mystic idea that we're all one consciousness and we're just deviations from or modulations of that same one consciousness, and that realizing that and living in the awareness of that is enlightenment, and all that's true and we're all connected. How are we going to make up a meditation mantra and then keep it a secret? It's just so corny to me. So anyway,
the one I heard a guy on Rogan that was explaining that he was into Transcendental Meditation, and the reason he said he wouldn't say what his words were was because by even telling you what it is, you'll react to it, and any sort of reaction you give me to it assigns a type of meaning to this word, and I'll remember that like somebody else had a reaction to this phrase.
That's interesting.
And so it gets a definition once you say it out loud. Was the way that he explained it. Yeah.
But when I go get the official certified Transcendental Meditation training by the certified TM, copyright, instructor.
TM.
I think it's TMC. No, it might be TMTM. That's so stupid. And this guy, his name's Philip Land, it's in Coeur d'Alene where I'm doing the training, gives me a mantra well, I have opinions about Philip Land, who he is and what it means that he gave me that particular mantra. And that's how they do it. It's like your trainer gives you a mantra. But I watched this YouTube video of this guy roasting Transcendental Meditation because I was like, all right, if I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to go look up like what opinions are against this. Like, what's the argument against what I'm about to start doing? And this guy's like talking about a TM instructor that charges $500 to teach people the TM technique, and then he gives them all the same mantra. So like, I think the mantra is supposed to be personalized, or maybe there's one mantra that they all do, but it's a secret. Like, I don't know. But as far as I've found so far, my own untrained attempts at practicing transcendental meditation have been very rewarding. And so here's the experience I had on Saturday.
Cool.
A couple minutes into it, and I set a timer for 20 minutes and set it aside. And then a couple minutes into it, I saw in my imagination or psyche or whatever you want to call it, myself sitting in the chair that I was sitting in, and I could tell that there was three entities that could be differentiated that were my body, mind, and spirit. And the way that it looked was like I could see my body sitting just as I was sitting in the chair. And then I could see that my mind was this kind of orb of energy, and that top part of my body that was, that normally would be orchestrating what was happening in my body, but at this moment was not telling my body anything. And so it was strictly in communication between the spirit. Like normally I would see the mind and body communicating, but because my body was still, I could just see the mind and spirit communicating.
Okay.
And the spirit was like this blue light body standing beside behind my body, like kind of like a barber would stand over, like behind somebody and stand over them. And his hands were the mind. So he was like working like this. And his hands were the mind. Like they were the mind and simultaneously were just guiding and making the mind do what it was doing. So I felt like the mind is the spirit's hands. Like that's what I felt like seeing this. And then I started to, and this is going to be like recalling a dream where you go through it and then you go, oh wait, no, but before that, this. Like,
the timeline's not totally clear, and
I'm definitely going to do that.
That's fine.
So then I started to think, well, if I am this sort of outside spectator looking at what I perceive as my body, mind, and spirit, and if hypothetically I actually am viewing what actually is my body, mind, and spirit, like if it's not a projection of my imagination, but I'm really leaving my body or experiencing my body from a different perspective in consciousness than normal, what does that mean? Like, what am I? Like, if I can observe all of that from an outside perspective, then what is the viewer that I currently am? Like, what is that? And so I asked, like, if that's all me, then what's me? And then the word me bounced off of the environment back into my face in a way that was very loud and jarring and frightening, and went, me, and it just like echoed in a way that was, it was like a spinning echo. It's like I started to spin and spiral, and the word me was just echoing repeatedly and rapidly. As if it was a sin to ask the question, as if the question was so foolish that instead of receiving a response, it bounced back into my face. And then I was spinning and spinning, and then it stopped spinning, and I was in some sort of projection or concept of heaven. And it was like light all around. And Maharishi, the yogi guy who like founded this meditation technique, was like floating around, like I was with him. And I was like, are you really Maharishi? Like, am I actually talking to the spirit of Maharishi? Or am I just going through an imagination exercise here where I'm generating images? And whatever it was, didn't respond to the question, and responded in a telepathic way to say, like there's no point in answering that question. Like, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, practically speaking, whether you're talking to a interdimensional being that used to exist as a physical body, or whether you're talking to a figment of your imagination. Like the information that you're going to learn here and your ability to make that information actionable and productive in your life isn't determined by whether or not experience is real. And the only reason it would matter if this experience is real or not, so that you could have some sort of bragging rights about talking to a spirit, which doesn't matter either, because people either believe in that sort of thing or they don't. So who cares?
Yeah.
So he didn't say all that, but he just said, like, doesn't matter. And then just started, like, showing me, like, started stirring up the environment around us and showing me that it was all swirling together and just demonstrating for me. So instead of responding with words, he responded with moving images made of the environment that we were in, and just said, look how this all swirls together as one big orchestrated thing. Look at how, as Alan Watts said, there's jazz going on. Look how this is all one thing and it's all swirling together and interacting. And then I started to think, well, if this is real, like, if I'm having a vision of heaven and Maharishi is here, where's Jesus? How does Jesus fit into this? And so I kind of just asked, like, I want to see the Christ. I want to see Jesus. And then a face appeared that, it's like if we were in an environment made of white light, a face appeared in that white light, like almost as if the wall turned into a face and started talking.
Got it.
Kind of like the sun face from the Teletubbies. The baby in the sun.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like the very environment turned into a face and started speaking, but was simultaneously, and this was something that I was aware of in this experience, but wasn't communicated to me. It was just evident that that face speaking as the wall, the light wall face, was also occupying a dimension that was beyond, above, and superior to the room that me and Maharishi were in, and was speaking down to a lower level. Like if there was multiple levels of heaven, we're in like the bottom level of heaven, and he's at the top level of heaven, and the heaven that we are in is made of him.
Like a face pushing out of a ceiling.
Yes, like a face pushing out of a ceiling and self-evidently occupying a higher floor at the same time. And basically said, I am in the true heaven, and I'm saving a seat for you. I'm saving a seat for everybody. This is where everyone's destined to end up, but the place that you're at is great, and like everything's fine. It was just a feeling of total peace and tranquility. And Maharishi started flying around, just having fun, just basically flying around like he was in an amusement park or something. But Jesus didn't move. Like Jesus was just the wall. Jesus wasn't, what's the word? What's the word for like enjoying, with kind of a sinful connotation? Like if you were going to get a dessert.
I don't know.
Like,
wasn't entertained, wasn't intrigued, wasn't interested.
Yeah, but it's the word for like when you do something you don't really need to do and you do it just for the enjoyment, and it's a little Indulge, yes.
Okay.
Jesus wasn't indulging in anything, or he wasn't indulging in the experience. He was the experience, but Maharishi was just like having a blast. I wasn't worried about the fact that he was like on a lower level of heaven or something. He's just like having a fucking blast. So anyway, then that experience started to fade out, and then my whole vision, like my eyes were closed for the whole 20 minutes. My vision all became occupied by this eyeball that was, and I'm like, what is this eyeball? And it didn't look like the Egyptian eyeball that's like, you know those images that are like, look, the pineal gland looks like, or pineal or whatever, looks like this Egyptian eye symbol. Like it didn't look like that.
Okay.
It just looked like a normal eye.
What color was it?
No color.
Okay.
Like if a color is an individual slice of the total spectrum of light, this was every color at the same time, the whole spectrum. Like it's just that sort of white.
Okay.
It's not white in the sense that like that your shirt is white as opposed to blue, but it's just the whole spectrum. You know, it's just no color in particular.
Okay.
So I'm like, cool, what does this eye mean? That's pretty interesting. And it's like, so here's something. Here's the part where I skip backwards. So I asked Jesus I told Jesus, like, hey, dude, I'm going through it. Life is hard. Like, what advice do you have? Because being and existing and growing and evolving and living and dying and this whole thing sucks. Like, this is really hard. I'm going through it. what can you tell me? Like, tell me what to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, all I can do is purify you and send you back out. All I can do is just spit shine you up and turn you around and send you back out. I can't tell you what to do. And I'm like, why can't you tell me what to do? Like, if you're the whole thing, why not just tell me what to do? He's like, because you really are an individual, unique, sentient entity. You really are. You really have free will and can do what you want. I'm like, but this whole experience is making me feel like we're all just one thing. Like, we're all just the same consciousness manifesting itself in different ways and all flowing together in this one dance that we're not currently consciously aware of. And like, if we're all just this one thing, what would it mean for an individual particle of that same thing to have free will? Why would that matter? And why would I have free will? Like, and I didn't get an answer to that question, but then, but I guess I did, because then that scene like faded out and then the eye appeared. And then I'm like, hey, what's the eye? And the answer that I knew as soon as I asked the question, not like a voice or anything, but I just asked and then knew, like, what is this eye? The answer was, the I is the awareness of that universal consciousness, but it's possible to be an individual, freely acting entity with awareness of that universal consciousness. So you can be I and thou at the same time. Like, you can be this and that. You can be an individual and universal consciousness at the same time, or at least an individual with the security of knowing that at the end of the day, everything's God, everything's going to be fine. There's no bottomless pit. There's no bad ending to the story. Almost like it's a lot more fun to play Grand Theft Auto knowing that you're not in real danger than it would be to become Carl in the game and fear for your life because like the ballas are trying to kill you or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
So it's like, so that reminded me of that Egyptian idea of, I always forget the names, was Horus and Osiris?
Oh no, Osiris is the bad, or the death guy. Not bad necessarily, but the death guy. It's Horus and...
I know Isis is one.
Isis
That's
and
the
Horus?
woman.
That's all I got for Egyptian gods.
Willie, comment. Let us know what Egyptian word we're forgetting. But there's this old Egyptian idea that like there is a such thing as being simultaneously aware of your individuality as a freely acting entity and aware of the universal consciousness.
It is Osiris.
That you're...
Set is the bad one. Never mind.
Horus and Osiris,
yeah,
right?
You're right.
Which one's the son and which one's the father?
Horus is the one with the eye, so he's the son.
That'd be the father. The I is like the all-knowing, and then the individual acting entity is the other part, right? We don't know. Who
I think
cares?
Horus, then Osiris. Yeah, I think Horus is the father.
So, yeah, you can look it up, but who cares?
Okay.
There's an Egyptian idea that you can be that
we've
individual
talked about
entity in the
this.
universal thing, you know, and the Christian idea that the Savior is the individual who is the Father, and the Father is Him, and it's an old idea.
We're talking about like the idea of being fully present in your life, but also being fully aware of the big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was learning from this experience that I can be aware of the whole thing and still just be Travis. You know, like it doesn't mean that if there really is this like universal cosmic consciousness, that's great because that means that the whole thing ends well, but I can still eat yogurt and ride a bike and play a video game and just like read books and just do shit. You know, like it doesn't mean, well, then I should sit in a monastery for the rest of my life. Like, so I was kind of breaking some assumptions and biases. And then this is the part that makes the whole thing crazy to me. This is fucking weird.
Okay.
So then, as that experience fades out, I start to feel that I'm putting on like a robot suit. Like I'm putting on, like, I can feel my spirit is like putting on something. And I realize that it's my awareness automatically being drawn back to my body.
Wow.
And then I feel that I'm fully occupying my body. And I know for a fact that it's been exactly 20 minutes. And I'm like, it's been 20 minutes. I know because I just came from a timeless dimension, and I didn't feel like it had been 20 minutes. Like I know that this conversation's been going on for about 15. It's been 19. Not that kind of knowing, like guessing how long it's been. Just the kind of like, well, I know that if my spirit's getting back into my body, my spirit just knows that it's been 20 minutes. So I open my eyes and pick up my timer, and it says 12 seconds.
Wow.
And, but disclaimer, the next day I was meditating. So yesterday I was meditating at Brooke's house, and I had my timer sitting right here, and I was meditating, and she was like downstairs doing something, and she came up.
And were you attempting to do transcendental meditation again?
I wasn't. I was
Okay.
doing focusing meditation where you stare at something for the entire time.
Okay.
And so a different thing. And then she came in, and I was like, I just have like a minute left. And I was like all confident, right? Like, I know how to tell time with my brain. And like, she looked down at my phone and laughed, and I looked at my phone, it was like 5 minutes left. So it's like, this is not something that I have any ability to consistently do, but it's just something very strange that happened, where it's not that I mentally knew that it had been 20 minutes, but I realized based on what my spirit was doing, clicking back into my body, that the meditation was over, and it was really weird. So, and I know
Crazy story.
that like meditation experience or religious experience or whatever you want to call it was influenced by the fact that I've been reading this book, because like I just finished this book today, but I was probably 2/3 of the way through it at this point, and it's a really inspiring read, and it makes me really confident in the ability of whatever we really are to transcend whatever this really is, you know, and experience something else and zoom out a little bit, you know, on what life really is, that it's not this little physical room. Like it is, this is valuable too, but it's not just this. Like this is a book that makes me feel like it's liberating me from some perspective prisons in a way that's practical and healthy and sound and clear. Like this author is so not hippie-ish or mysticky. He references some scientific stuff and physics stuff and just says everything really clearly. I highly recommend this book, and I'm really excited to read the Bible after reading this book, because sometimes I'm reading the Bible and I'm just like, I know this is a really powerful, meaningful book, and I feel like I don't get it. Like I feel like I don't get what it's really getting at.
Yeah.
And I know based on the miraculous way that this whole thing happened that there's something serious going on here with this book. And like, I just don't really understand it. Like I can read it and get something out of it every time, but I always feel like, what is really this God character that plays a role in the story as a character and is also hypothetically the narrator or author or editor of the whole thing, editor-in-chief of the whole thing,
Or just viewer? Like when I think about God, oftentimes I think it's like that this is for his entertainment, that like this is
he's just the audience.
that he is the audience, and so he's like just putting on a show for himself kind of thing.
Yeah, I have no problem with thinking about it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, but after reading this book, I'm like, I want to go reread some biblical stuff from the perspective that that God, or I am, like the character in the Bible, is unfragmented, uncorrupted, universal awareness, or being with a capital B, that is just that. And it's not like I haven't thought about it that way before, but it's just that this book, I mean, it's 194 pages, or, my bad, 194 pages and then a foreword, or an afterword. But it's like 200 pages of something so simple. Like you can say in one sentence what this book is saying, that, or maybe a couple sentences, that the nature of consciousness is universal awareness or being that chooses to divide itself into different finite experiences and perspectives, and what we all are deep down is that simple awareness, that the fall in Christian theology is the division of that universal awareness into differentiated finite entities, or what seems like differentiated finite entities. That what the Hindus are saying about, like this philosophy in Hindu is called Vedanta, like the philosophy that this is all an illusion, in the sense that we're just temporarily deceived into thinking that we're separate, that you're that and I'm this. That's an illusion that we've chosen to enter into and that will inevitably end. and that the goal of the whole thing is kind of just to get back to where we were at the beginning.
Right.
But he goes on for 200 pages articulating how that really can be the case. So I can go through some of the ways that he articulates this. One of the things that was really interesting that he said was that physics has never found matter, which is really interesting because it is the case that like the more that physicists zoom into the nature of being, the more they just find smaller and smaller and smaller particles or atoms or whatever that they're like, okay, the whole what are the basic building blocks of the universe? You know, physicists are trying to answer that question, and it seems like they just keep going a level down and down and down and down.
Sure. Yeah. Like I feel like in school it was like when it comes down to atoms, and atoms are made up of neutrons, protons, and electrons.
Yeah.
But now I feel like I've heard of different things like gluons and microns, like things that are smaller than that like make those up. So I don't know.
And then there's a theory now that everything is really made out of fields of energy, not physical particles. And so it does seem like I'm not a physicist, clearly. So somebody comment and tell me something smarter about physics, please. But what theologians are saying, or have been saying for thousands of years, and I don't mean Christians, like all religious philosophers are saying that you can just keep going down and down and down and down and down, and it'll keep going down. It's going to keep going down forever. So like you can go as many levels down as you need to go until you're convinced that it goes down forever, but there's never going to be a point where you say, okay, now this is the real building blocks of reality and there's nothing past this. And if you did get to that point, you would get down to something dimensionless that is simultaneously everything. Like if you zoomed all the way to everything, you'd find nothing. And if you zoomed all the way to nothing, you'd find everything. That there is a structure to the universe that like everything is really a dimensionless space of awareness. And you can zoom all the way out into space or all the way down into particles, and you're going to find the same thing. You're going to find that alpha and omega. You're going to find that I am. Like that's what's waiting there. So something interesting this book talked about is the hard problem of consciousness. I haven't heard this before, but it's one of those like yet to be solved puzzles in the scientific fields. And the challenge is to explain how consciousness arises from matter. That's one of the fundamental scientific questions that hasn't been answered. How does consciousness arise from matter? So it's like everything I'm saying could be a bunch of gobbledygook, but I'm gobbledygooking about a subject that's gobbledygook to everybody at the end of the day. Like we don't know, we know a lot about the mechanics of how the brain passes around information, synapses and stuff like that, but we don't know how it can be that physical matter can manipulate itself or be manipulated to the point that it springs into consciousness and awareness, and that now we can perceive. Like that has not been addressed or answered, and that's such a basic question that contemplating that question seriously to me leads to the question, is that the completely wrong fucking question? Like, is it really the case that intelligence-less, dumb dirt bumping into each other for no particular reason will eventually arise in an experience so complicated that it seems meaningful to intelligent beings with trillions of cells inside of us? Like, that just sounds so ridiculous on a basic common sense level.
Because that would mean that there was like a time where there was stuff, but there was nobody there to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Which is like so hard to fathom. Yeah. Because it's hard to fathom stuff if nobody saw it.
Right.
That's like if a tree fell in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did it actually make a sound?
So the materialist paradigm that there was a point in time when there was stuff, but it wasn't intelligent or aware or intentional or creative, and now it is. It's like, well, you can't prove that. You can't anywhere near prove that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that's like, I have friends like Kevin, for example, I think I've referenced Kevin before because he's like my
Yeah.
he's my
He's like the ideal amount of skeptics. Like, where could I convince Kevin? Could I explain this to Kevin?
No,
No.
my marker is am I going to sound like I belong in a mental hospital to Kevin? That's my marker.
Okay.
Not could I convince Kevin that this is the case, but like if Kevin watched
Could I
this,
convince Kevin to not put me in a mental hospital?
yeah, pretty much.
What if I
because
said this?
because I want an intelligent, educated. He's a pharmacist. He's a doctor. Like he's a scientifically educated person. I want someone like him to watch this and say like, this is a person exploring ideas in a way that's relatively positive, even though I don't agree with his conclusions or what he's saying.
Yeah.
Like this is a sane person exploring abstract ideas. That's the standard for me, because I don't expect to convince somebody that the basic paradigm that they live in, a world in which consciousness arose from physical matter, and the universe isn't creative or intelligent, that I'm going to go break that, without sneaking them acid in their coffee or something.
Right.
Like I'm not gonna be able to change somebody's mind about that. Even then, people take acid and realize like, oh, the universe is some other thing. This blows my mind. Or they take acid and they're like, that was fucking weird,
Yeah.
So even then, there's really no way to convince somebody. But I do think like this is one of those topics where someone like Kevin will look at it and be like, no, like your thinking is so ignorant because you don't understand these 10,000 things, like to cite the Tao Te Ching, that I know about the universe. It's like you can know 10,000 things about the universe and still put all those 10,000 things on a wrong foundation. Like you can learn 10,000 reasons to believe one lie, and it doesn't make you right that you have more information. But when you think about this with a childlike common sense, which is not the scientific way, just like, do you really think there is a point in the universe where there was nothing and it was dead and it was not creative or intelligent, and then it turned into something creative or intelligent? We're getting to a point where science has gone so far that scientific descriptions of the Big Bang sound the same as Genesis. Like they're just like, there was a miraculous event in which one dimensionless piece of space exploded into all potentialities. And it's like, yeah, that's what theologians have been saying. There was a miraculous birth of God at the beginning of being. Like now we're just saying the same thing, and it's kind of silly. But anyway, let's go on a different chapter. The Direct Path to Enlightenment, that was a really fun chapter that described how the realization that all of being is just one of the metaphors that it used really commonly was a screen and a movie. So the universe is like a screen and your experience is like a movie. And no matter what movie plays, it's still a screen. You can infinitely modulate and manipulate the pixels on the screen to create, not literally infinite, but hypothetically, or at least on the, like, as far as I'm capable of perceiving or imagining, infinite possibilities of combinations of colors of pixels on that screen, make an almost infinite amount of different images, but it's always going to be that screen. That's what reality is like, and that the direct path to enlightenment is to realize that everything is merely that screen changing, that you experience this moment and then the next moment and then the next moment and then the next moment, and all of that is just that screen shifting. You're never distant from that screen being God. You're never distant from God. You're never experiencing something that isn't God. Everything is just God going like this. And right here, it's a little different than right here and right here and right here. But it's never not God. It's never not it with a capital I. It's always that, just moving and changing or growing or exploring or adventuring or whatever. Yeah. And that what God's doing is allowing all the potential within him to be expressed. In the same way that that a crazy artist like Jim Carrey becomes radically different roles for all of these movies, and then becomes a painter and goes and does a motivational speech and does all of these things where he looks like a completely different thing. There's infinite potentialities within the one character of Jim Carrey that Jim Carrey feels the need to express. And the way he expresses them is by becoming them.
Sure.
You know, he doesn't just talk about painting, like he becomes a painter. He doesn't talk about the drama or comedy. He becomes drama and becomes comedy and loses himself temporarily in that, but always returns to that same Jim Carrey. And that's what God's doing as Evan and as Raleigh and as Travis, is just allowing every potentiality within himself to be expressed. There's a quote from a Richard Rohr book, The Universal Christ, that said, God loves things by becoming them, which is reminiscent of the concept of compassion and empathy. Like, you don't really give a fuck about me completely if you're not experiencing what I'm experiencing with me. Like, looking me in the eye and being like, I'm there too.
Yeah.
Like, that's that real compassion and empathy that's really loving something by becoming it. And that you and me and Evan are all just different expressions of that sort of cosmic empathy, that God is just allowing every part of himself to be expressed and is fully present in each expression of himself, but temporarily lost in that expression, because if he wasn't, then it wouldn't be real. If Jim Carrey was thinking in the back of his head the whole time, you know, I'm really just pretending, then he didn't really fucking do it. So he's got to really break. He's got to really dissociate. He's got to really become that.
Right.
But there's a certain...
So God is like so deeply committed to playing out the role of Raleigh that Raleigh doesn't even remember he's God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the only way that it would really be that.
It's the only way that he could really totally feel what it's like to be Raleigh.
Yeah.
Is if he forgot that he was something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so God is like this great character that's exploring being by expressing every possible potentiality. And it reminds me of this quote that I've heard in the Bible multiple times and never really attached meaningful to, that all things that I've never attached meaning to, but has like reverberated in my head. All things must come to pass, which reminds me of the theoretical physics idea that there are infinite alternate dimensions in which everything that you could imagine is happening. And maybe it's true that every single possible combination of experience must happen in order for the game to be complete, and that when we get there, we'll start the game over. Or maybe it's that every time you imagine something, you have imagined it into being, and because it exists in your imagination, it now does exist, because you're an extension of God, and your imagination is an extension of you. Like, he's the body, you're the arm, your imagination's the hand, and that one fantasy is the finger. You know, it's just an extension of that same unified consciousness.
Yeah.
But where this book gets really radical is in making the argument that the hard problem of consciousness is the wrong question to ask, because consciousness doesn't arise from matter, because matter arises from consciousness, but not that consciousness becomes matter or dies and is matter and is something dead, but that everything is consciousness. Like matter is just an expression or modulation of consciousness. Matter is part of just some of the pixels on the screen. God is the screen, and you can look at a movie and it looks like there's a person, it looks like there's a chair, and it looks like there's a carpet, but the person, the chair, and the carpet are all equally screen, you know. And so everything that you perceive as conscious or you perceive as matter is all just as screen as anything else, and it's all consciousness. That consciousness is all that there is, because if it's not conscious, then it isn't, you know. Like if it's not being, if it's not awareness, then it's not, then it doesn't be, and
just
it
like
isn't.
we're saying, like if there couldn't, it's hard to even imagine the idea of there being a world pre-consciousness, because like, well, how does it even exist if nobody is there to experience it?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there is a such thing as being that isn't conscious. Like maybe being conscious is the second step. Maybe there is a such thing as being, but it isn't. Like it exists, but it doesn't know it exists yet. Then maybe there's being and then there's consciousness. You know, obviously I don't know, but that's that Judeo-Christian idea that the name of God is I am that I am. Like awareness not justified by any perspective, awareness that is just awareness. Like I am that I am. That's what else could it mean? What else could it possibly mean if the Bible is true, which, you know, you can fucking believe that or not,
Sure.
obviously, but if you take the Bible seriously, what else could that possibly mean? That the name of God is I am that I am. That's the name that he identified himself as.
Yeah.
Because people called him all sorts of shit. But God never showed up and said, I'm Craig. You know, I'm Jehovah. He's I am that I am. And then one
Yeah.
of the 10 commandments is
I am that I am.
I am that I am.
I am that I am. So what does the that mean in that context?
Well, I think theoretically it's the same thing as that going on forever. I am that I am that I am that I am that I am. I don't think
Is it like because like I am because I am, like I just am.
I thought it was I am that I am.
That's what I'm saying. I am that I am. Yeah, and that is the quote, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's not I am because I am, it's just I am that I am. So it's like I'm aware because I'm aware because I'm aware because I'm aware because I'm aware. Or like another way to word it would be self-validating or self-justifying awareness. Awareness not justified by any other awareness other than its own awareness. I am that I am.
As far as it knows.
As far as it knows, maybe there's something beyond it, and maybe it's this cocky character that thinks it's reached the end. Maybe it's some interdimensional being having a God crisis, God complex.
Yeah, it just made me think of an Alex Jones quote from when he was on Rogan, and he said, God knows everything except where he came from.
Fuck.
I don't know where he got that from. But
That's
he said,
so heavy.
God knows everything except where he came from.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was, I think it was Maharishi that said this, like, because I was watching one of his interviews yesterday. I'm not certain where I got this from, but it was that God is, that we are the moving and dancing and spontaneous motion of God, maybe for no reason other than to entertain and comfort himself. So that sort of idea lines up with that Alex Jones-ism, that like, that God is just doing stuff because he doesn't know what to do, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just so comforting if it's true, because God, isn't that what reality feels like? Like,
Yeah.
fuck, I'm alive, so I'm aware, I'm alive, I'm around, I'm here, I might as well do something. Like, that's really what being conscious feels like. It's like I'm conscious and I don't know why I'm conscious. The only reason I know I'm conscious is because I'm conscious. So I really don't know what it means that I'm conscious. There's any meaning is contained within consciousness. Like, I can be conscious that this keyboard means I can operate this computer, which means I can say something to my friends on YouTube. But all of the meaning is contained within consciousness. So there's no meaning to consciousness itself.
Sure.
And it's like, fuck, we might as well listen to music or something. It's like,
That also reminded me a lot of a Fight Club quote. Tyler Durden says that we are not special. We are the same decaying organic matter as everything else. We are the all singing, all dancing crap of the world.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What if God is just that? Just singing, dancing, crap dust.
Yeah.
And I mean, if that is God, then if I was that, I would certainly just forget and go on a trip. You know, just go on a trip where I got to forget when anything was, and then gradually realize that I was that again, and then just go again. That is probably what I would do.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's if you don't know anything else outside of you, then that sounds like fun.
yeah.
That sounds like something to do.
But you know, something I don't understand is that what the transcendental meditation technique, for example, is about connecting with that universal awareness within yourself. And I'm not qualified to speak on this, but it seems to me that the purpose of meditation is, and I think that this is how Maharishi explains it, is that the purpose is to experience that peace within yourself that is absolutely unbreakable, like a peace that is unconditional, unconditional peace that's not, that doesn't rely on any individual experience to be peace, but is infinite peace. The kind of peace that the Buddha said you can only reach through complete non-attachment, or the kind of peace that Jesus was talking about when he said, "Peace, be still." So if that Hindu, Christian, Buddhist, universal peace that we're trying to achieve through following Christ or through meditation or through whatever means is so peaceful, why do we leave exactly? Like,
why do we leave?
yeah, why do we fall? Why do we leave that being, that universal awareness? Like, why do anything? Because if that,
I don't know, maybe
what would be more enjoyable than that universal peace? Maybe just playing a game of peekaboo
I don't
with
know.
that
Maybe-
universal peace?
Maybe it's more fun to pretend there's a threat, like to play
Yeah.
a game where to play a game versus somebody, like play a game where there's like consequences, or at least you think that there's consequences, rather
Yeah.
than to just be in eternal bliss. Like,
Yeah.
maybe that gets boring.
Yeah. Alan Watts called it peekaboo. And
Peekaboo, as in,
like, you are God playing peekaboo. Like, you
Okay.
being aware but not aware
Okay.
that you are capital A aware is just God playing peekaboo.
okay,
And like, and just like you eat spicier and spicier foods as you go on throughout life,
Yeah.
you know, there's an amount of suffering that's pretty unthinkable, and that makes an idea like this sound really tasteless and out of touch. Because it's like, so that's just a game of peekaboo? Like, look at this level of evil. It's like, not a game of peekaboo I'd sign up for, but tell you what, if I experienced 500 more lifetimes
Maybe.
that got a little worse each time, I might eventually just fucking really want to get into something crunchy, you
Yeah.
know, and I might eventually end up experiencing that level of suffering
yeah,
strictly because it's what I really need to forget, you know, that I am that, just for fun.
Yeah.
That's not that's a really tasteless, ignorant sounding, ugly idea. Like, no matter how much you're suffering, you know, you're doing that for fun, you know, and you want it. Like, it's really wrong. It's an idea that like, if it is universally basically true,
Mhm.
it's not really something that you can go out preaching, because it's not really actionable, you know, like you can.
I think it's a plausible theory, but yeah, I don't know what you do with it.
And you know what's dangerous about the idea is that if, like, let's say you and I become completely convinced in this moment that we are that universal awareness, that we are God playing peekaboo, then we will invite deeper suffering into our lives subconsciously in order to convince ourselves once again that we are not that, with a capital T. So it's like, to realize an idea of this magnitude is to set yourself up for a deeper suffering. Because if you're now more deeply aware that you really are that, with a capital T, then it's going to take more to convince you next time that you're really
Sure.
alone in this hellhole we call a universe, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one of these ideas that's like, I think it needs to be applied in order to be, it's an idea that you'll lose if you don't share it. It's like, if you find this idea and then you say, you know what, I'm going to go about gently, gracefully, and kindly helping people wake up to this notion that suffering is an illusion and we're all the same thing, then maybe you can keep it. Maybe that's how you water it, you know? But if you just realize it for the sake of realizing it, then all you're going to do is repeat that pattern, repeat that karma pattern, repeat that cycle, repeat that suffering, and make the boo a little scarier next time, so that it's still another game of peekaboo. You get what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. Something I think about a lot is the idea that there's like a relationship between, like, the more you learn, like the more sort of, I guess, like esoteric, or like the more knowledge you have about the nature of reality, that, like, I picture that as like taking like a bigger bite of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and that, like, as you do that, you are sort of going farther and farther outside of the garden, and like things get worse for you there, and because as you become more aware of things, you necessarily feel a greater sense of responsibility that you didn't feel when you didn't know that you had that responsibility. But then, like, the farther you go into that, sort of the worse things get for you.
Yeah.
And it might just be that it gets that there is an end, that eventually you finish the fruit and you know all of it, and that's like the worst moment. But then beyond that, there's like a breakthrough into maybe back to the garden, back to peace. Maybe
Yeah.
it's something like that.
I would think so.
Yeah.
In the biblical narrative, at the very beginning, God, everything. If you're going to interpret the Bible in a consciousness, in this kind of cosmic consciousness-based way, everything was united. All of being was together with God, and then a being within being decided to depart from God in order to obtain the knowledge of good and evil. So that's the original sin, or that's the cause of the fall. So then the beings leave, and so the first sin is to acquire the knowledge of good and evil, and from the snake. But then by the New Testament, the Bible is saying acquire the knowledge of the serpent. That's what the New Testament says. Be as harmful as doves, but as wise as serpents. So it's like, once you've started the game, you can't go back.
Right.
That's the biblical narrative. It's like,
yeah.
The fundamental problem with being is that we chose to be conscious, and the only cure for it is all of the consciousness.
More consciousness. You got to go deeper and deeper into this if you ever want to get out.
Yeah.
You can't, once you've started digging this hole, once you get a certain amount of depth in, the only way out is to get all the way through.
Dig all the way to the bottom of the earth,
Yeah.
and go through the flaming core in the middle. Like,
Yeah.
you don't get to turn around. And so, and something that's interesting about that narrative is that it does set up the serpent as the bad guy in a way that makes sense, because, I mean, when I look at that story, I think like, well, the serpent was telling them the truth. Like, they would acquire the knowledge of God if they ate the fruit. Like, we are working towards acquiring the knowledge of God. We are, through sciences, learning the full inner workings of biology and space and all this stuff. And like, we're getting there. Who's to say how far off we are? But like, wasn't the serpent right? Weren't we ignorant, clueless beings under the protection of God? What Dostoevsky would call the idiot. And the serpent was telling us the truth, that if we took the bite of the fruit like God told us not to, that we would acquire the knowledge of God. Like, yeah, but I think the lie is that the serpent was promising us something that we already had. Like, he was saying, we were present with God completely. Consciousness was unbroken and unfragmented and whole. Capital W, whole. And then the serpent in the garden says, if you eat the fruit, you'll insert what you already have here, and God doesn't want you to. And so, like, we leave only to have to venture back. So it really is a lie. So he really is the bad guy. But then you go one step further, and God created the serpent. So God obviously chose to ignite a spark of chaos, within that order, that would expand until it became that order again.
Yeah, like that. It makes me think of like so we think of the idea of like God being just in perfect peace and like completely detached from everything, and like, why would he want to leave that? And it's like, I picture like God being there meditating and just being at absolute peace, but then he another guy comes along and he's like, you want to play though?
Yeah.
And then they play the game. Then the game plays out again.
Yeah.
And like, it just goes like that repeatedly forever. And then when he plays the game, it's it's the serpent, or it's chaos, or it's the devil, or it's whatever there that is like having him take a bite of the fruit, and then he forgets who he is, and they play this game all the way out, and then they break up into a million pieces, and then eventually come back together.
Yeah.
Until he feels like playing again, probably.
Yeah.
And maybe there's even levels to that. Maybe it's even like each time the game is higher stakes. Like, this is one iteration. Like, we're in one iteration of the game right now, and this is the highest the stakes have ever been, and this is like the most intense game there's ever been for God.
Yeah.
And that after this one, God and the devil are going to play this game again, but it's going to be like even more intense this time, because he's naturally going through that same sort of progression that we go through, maybe like throughout lifetimes or something like that, where we just have to take on more and more suffering so that the boo is bigger.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like
Yeah.
that. Maybe there's levels to that.
Yeah.
Maybe it goes forever. I don't know.
And it's hard to think about like how many levels of meta to go out before just skipping all metas and taking it all the way to the logical extreme. Because like if this single timeline is this one iteration of the game God plays where he forgets himself, splits into a million pieces, and then eventually finds himself again, opens his eyes in the garden again, eats the fruit again. If this is just one iteration of that, and the next time it's going to be more intense, and the next time it's going to be more intense, and the next time more, then there are only so many possibilities of that can happen. So that is all just one game that is that too. You know, like we incarnate over and over again and become another person and another person, another person, another person. God does the same thing. Is God again, is God again, is God again. But like, what's the point of separating those two games into two layers of meta? You know, like
Right.
Either way,
it's basically just more levels. It's all the same game.
right. It's like more levels of the same thing. Like it's like, yeah, this is what happens forever. So then if it's true that chain reaction just happens forever, then there's got to be a base reality that totally transcends that cycle or process in which everything is complete, in which every single game has been played out. There's got to be a base reality where every game has been played.
Maybe.
Like, because for the game to be playing over and over again, there has to be some like finite, or not finite, maybe finite too, but I meant linear timeline where there's God 1, God 2, God 3, God 4, or Raleigh 1, Raleigh 2, Raleigh 3, Raleigh 4, or repeated iterations of forgetting and remembering. Then that can't be all there is. Like there has to be a dimension beyond that linear timeline in which the whole game has already been played out. Like if we're page 68 on the book, there has to be a dimension in which that whole book is sitting on the table. You know what I mean? And
that sometimes feels true to me, although in this moment it doesn't. Right now it feels like, I don't know, maybe there could just be every god doesn't know where he came from until he finishes the game that he's in the middle of, and then he remembers, oh, right, I came from here. Anyway, let's play again.
Yeah.
But it's like they just never, there
But
just
it's like,
never is a top.
But if that linear timeline, if we're a little swirl of linear timelines happening in this little ball that exists within this ball that's God timelines, and this ball which is God timelines, there's still something at the end. There still has to be some. I'm just repeating the same thing again.
Unless
but
like
I
loops
think
or something.
there is like
maybe there's just like a sequence of a few gods and they're just in a circle and they're like God over each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I really do think that it works like that, but
Yeah.
that there really is like there is a being that is I am, that is the Alpha and the Omega, that is the beginning and the end. Like I think that's what the biblical idea of God really is that that transcending that whole entire process, there is something that is simultaneously the very beginning and the very end at the same time, and it's the glue that holds the whole thing together, and it's the universal consciousness or awareness or I am, or nirvana or whatever. It has no attachment to anything. You know, it's the whole thing. It's the book of books of books of books. Like I think that's what the Bible is saying. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but I think that really is the idea, you know, that God's not coming and saying to man, you are a process just as I am a process, and even I don't know where it all began or where it all ends. It's saying there really is an entity that we can contact psychically that has been through the whole damn thing and will help us and be with us. And so I think that actually exists. Like, I think all of the... And, so...
That would be a lot cleaner, and I would like it better if that is the case. And it's very possible that that is the case.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
And just because... And if it is true that there's all these higher dimensions of consciousness and higher dimensions of universe, whatever the fuck you call it, where this being really is, and if that being who orchestrated the Bible really is trickling down information and contacting us, he could still be full of shit. You know, he could be like a dad struggling to pay the bills and telling his kid that he's 100% sure everything's good. You know,
Right.
so who's to say if he's not doing that?
Yeah.
And if he is doing that, why not trust him anyway? You know, like if you are a 6-year-old, like, what would be the utility of being a 6-year-old and having the existential crisis realization that your dad really doesn't know if the lights are going to be on next week?
Right.
Like, what's the point of that? Like, why not just play?
That skepticism isn't helpful.
No, I don't think that kind of, So like serenity prayer, like what do you have control over and what do you not?
Yeah.
You don't have control over whether there's really a God that really knows what's going on. If they're really a good father, you know, of this whole thing, we don't know. So we might as well act out the belief that there is. And then if acting out the belief that there is results in good things, and that makes it true, because that's the definition of truth, an idea that has utility when played out, like, which is not a universally agreed upon definition of truth, but an existentialist definition of truth, that it's true there's a table here because when I go like this, I hit a table.
Yeah.
If my hand went through it, then that idea wouldn't be true because it doesn't work when I play it out.
Yeah.
It's true that I can stand up, so when I play it out, it works. If you play out the idea that there's no God to be trusted, it doesn't work well. You get depressed and unmotivated and scared and nervous and have existential crises and freak out. And if you play out the idea that there's a good father transcending the whole thing that knows what's going on, that's got you, you'll be more successful, more productive, more happy. So if playing it out works, then doesn't that make it true? And if it doesn't, shouldn't we do it anyway? Like, fuck it.
Yeah.
You know, why not just believe a lie that makes it all better? And I don't mean like, I've heard Christians, like evangelical Christians say, well, you might as well believe in the Bible because if it's true, you go to heaven. If it's, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, might as well pick one kind of thing.
Yeah, you might as well believe in it because if it's true, then you're going to go to heaven for believing in it and hell for not believing in it. And if it's not true, then you're not going to get any reward for not believing in the Bible. Like, that's not the argument that I'm making.
Yeah.
Because God might find that sort of tribalistic ideological ignorance repulsive and punish you for it. It's really not clear. But I am saying that, like, the belief that everything's connected and trustworthy and intelligent, creative, and good and love, like, yeah, you really might as well.
Yeah.
You know, you really might as well. Yeah, there's more like metaphors in this about dreams. You know, everything that exists is that one consciousness dreaming. Provides a definition of meditation, and meditation is simply being aware that you are aware, which I really like. Because every technique of meditation feels a little corny to me, like, which I think I benefit from repeating a mantra, like the Transcendental Meditation thing, or staring at something for 20 minutes, or mindfulness meditation, just practicing being fully aware of everything that you're sensing and perceiving. Like, I think all the techniques are beneficial, but I think true meditation really is just being aware that you're aware. I think true meditation and true prayer are just being aware that you're aware. Because, because I mean, if you, but I guess only if this whole thing is true.
I think of prayer as attempting to talk to God.
Yeah. So to accept the presupposition that you are distant from God by choosing psychologically to attempt to contact God as though he's psychically distant from you seems to be prayer in ignorance. If this is true.
Okay.
Only if this is true. True prayer, if this is true, and if you're listening to the audio, I'm touching the book repeatedly when I say this, then true prayer would be to just be aware that you're aware. Because God consciousness is defined as I am, that I am. So to simply know that you are, that you are, that you are, that you are, would be true prayer. It's like...
But then how do you get stuff?
Well, if you really are that, then you don't need any stuff.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so if you're... So, like, to follow that question, if it's true that the fact that we're a particle of God is an illusion, and that what we really are is just God expressing himself in a certain way, then to treat yourself as though you're a particle distant from the whole and call out to God and ask for things is to attempt to fill a void that none of those things will ever fill. Like, you can ask being for a bicycle, and you will be more likely to stumble into a bicycle in the near future after making that prayer. And God does answer prayer, but if you're praying for things, then why do you want the things? You know, you want the things because you're on this eternal cosmic journey to fill some gap, and you're repeatedly trying to fill that gap with objects and experiences and perceptions, and you think, maybe if I could experience making love to the most beautiful woman, or experience having more money than everyone, or experience having all the physical objects that I wish that I had, then maybe that'll be it. And there's so many layers of desire that perhaps there is one desire that is the desire of desires. Like, there's an ultimate desire that we're trying to fulfill with smaller desires. And we play out that idea to a certain extent, that there is a hierarchy of desires, lower and higher desires. So we say in the field of psychology that someone desiring something that lessens their quality of life is maladaptive, and someone desiring something that improves their quality of life is adaptive. So we believe there's a hierarchy of desires. So then what desire is at the top of those desires? And what would it mean to pray for that? Well, you could pray for all the money and all the cars and all the things, and the law of attraction thing will work. Like, you will be more likely to attain those things because you focused on them and prayed for them and all that. But is it going to fill the real void? And if this consciousness only model of the universe is true, then the real desire is to remember that you are that. And to remember that you are that would be to simply be aware that you're aware. And that would make that the ultimate prayer.
Okay.
That you wouldn't need to pray for anything finite, you would need to pray for something infinite. But to pray for something infinite, if you are deep down the infinite, is simply to admit that you're the infinite. That would be the ultimate prayer.
That makes sense.
And so I think the law of attraction thing is true. Like, I do believe in the law of attraction.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem with it is, like, okay, I can get anything I want, then that still leaves a pretty big problem. What the fuck should I get? You know? I know I can go to the mall, and if I have $100, I can buy anything that's $100, but that doesn't, like, unlock reality. Like, still, what the fuck should I spend my $100 on?
Right.
And if the law of attraction is real, which I believe that it is, then what in God's name should I pray for? Literally. What should I spend my will on if my will can get me anything? Well, the answer to that question is whatever it is that you ultimately desire, whatever it is that you most deeply desire. And if it's true that everything is that same consciousness just having different experiences, then what you really desire is just to remember that you're that. And so there's this Christian term that's been getting a little popular lately in, like, non-denominational Christian circles of or not non-denominational, but the one that New Vintage is. It's like starts with a Protestant, starts with a P. Protestant is like, Protestant was the branch off Catholicism, right? Yeah. So in the Protestant denominations, there's this idea that's getting hot right now of praying in the Spirit, and it is praying in the presence of God for nothing but the presence of God.
Okay.
And so Christian theology is arriving at this same conclusion, that true prayer, and like the biggest church in the world is in fucking, I think it's South Korea or the Philippines or somewhere that I'm not familiar with. Could you look it up, the biggest church in the world? And the guy, I think it's South Korea. The church that has the highest attendance regularly. And it's a church that's like 150,000 every Sunday or something. It's a massive church. And
Jeez.
this guy, he prays in the Spirit for like 5 hours a day. Like, he prays in the Spirit and he preaches. He prays in the Spirit and he preaches. He prays in the Spirit and he preaches. And that's the top pastor in the world right now. Like, that's all he does. And I saw this interview where this pastor named John Bevere, who wrote a book about the Holy Spirit that I haven't read, but I went through his video curriculum while I was doing an internship at New Vintage.
South Korea, Yoido Full Gospel Church.
South Korea.
More than 800
830,000 members,
Wow.
South Korea. So John Bevere went and visited this guy somehow, and the guy got in his car, and John Bevere said it was just mind-blowing to be in the presence of this guy. And the guy got in the car with this stupid little childish grin on, and John Bevere said, "I feel like God just got into my car." And this pastor said back, "He did," just giggling like a little kid. "He did."
Whoa.
And I think that's the experience that that guy is having, that he's meditating truly or praying truly, whatever you want to call it. He is just spending time in the presence of God or in pure awareness or consciousness, and it's creating something massively impactful. Like something is going on there if 830,000 people want to show up to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Something very significant is happening, because you can go on the corner right now and start talking, and maybe 5 people will listen to you. Like that doesn't just happen, you know?
Attendance of around 200,000.
Regular attendance is 200,000.
Yeah, around 200,000, but it says there's like 480,000 members here.
480,000 members in the U.S. Like online or what?
On Wikipedia, that's what it says right here.
Oh, on Wikipedia it says 480,000 members, 200,000 weekly.
Yeah, 200,000 to 10 weekly.
Okay, word. So, anyway, big ass church, and that's what the guy does. And like, I think all of these sub techniques of meditation, there's something wrong with it. You know, there's something wrong with saying this is the right way to do it. This is the right way to do it. It's propping up another false idol, rather than just saying, hey, true meditation or true prayer is the same thing. Be aware that you're aware. Experience pure consciousness. Detach yourself from all temporal forms.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just wake up and remember that you're that. I think that's a real religious or spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. I have shared plenty from the book. I'm sure there's a lot of chunks in it that that really touched me that I didn't go over, but I've talked enough about it. You got anything?
I really like this idea. I like the idea of everything, or at least everyone, being an aspect of God. That like resonates with me a lot, and we've talked about it like a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
Pneuma comes to mind in particular, the Stoic idea that God broke himself up into pneuma, and that pneuma, God's consciousness, we refer to as pneuma, and it permeates all things, and it sounds exactly like what John Chang referred to as chi, and that idea that like there is just that everything is made of God, everything is made of these two types of pneuma that permeate everything, matter and antimatter, and it's all these just same two things, and it makes me think of that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that fits with what you read in that book?
Well, yeah, I do. Like, this book is making the argument that, and he uses the term non-dual a lot. He is into advocating for the transcendence of duality, and this is something.
The transcendence of duality?
Yeah.
Meaning
yeah.
he doesn't like duality?
No, not that he doesn't like duality, but that he believes that true religious experience is found in the transcendence of duality. That to go beyond all duality is to arrive at that with a capital T.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an issue that I had with C.S. Lewis and his half-hearted criticisms of other religious philosophies to try to recruit people into his religious ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Is that C.S. Lewis expressed that the Eastern idea of the yin and yang is that the universe is half good, half evil, that it's good and evil locked in an eternal battle, and that is absolute reality. And I think the real purpose of the yin and yang is to continuously zoom out in your perspective and seeing deeper levels of the universal law of duality playing out until you zoom out to a point where there is no more duality anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get to that point, you have arrived at the universal religious experience. So it's not that the yin and yang is the absolute with a capital A, but it's that you could look at you could go, oh, Republicans and Democrats, I'm on one side or another, and then you could zoom out and you go, oh, they both have a point. I see how this is a relationship. And you could go, oh, humans and animals. You go, oh, whoa, I see how this is all playing together. This is all a cycle of life. And then you could zoom out again and go earthlings and other. And you could just keep zooming out and zooming out on being until you get to a point where I think one of the last steps before universal religious realization would be mind and matter, which is consciousness and that which is perceived as separate from consciousness. Because like I can't perceive this table as being conscious. I consider it something separate from me. So I call it matter. I name it matter. It's something that I don't perceive to have life. And so I think one of the last steps in transcending duality would be to be something conscious, but to be conscious of something that you consider separate from you, which would make you mind and make that matter. And then when you realize, nope, even that is me, then now there is no more duality. So it's the philosophy of dualism is a strategy for getting people to climb the philosophy of dualism until they transcend it and know that once they have transcended it and they don't think that anything is separate, they don't think that anything is in competition or in chaos, or there's no chaos versus order anymore. You can see how everything is the one chaotic seeming perfect order, then you're there. You've gotten there. I think that's really the point of the yin yang thing. It's like every level of life has this pattern. So once you've gotten to the thing that doesn't have this pattern, you're there. And so your question was whether this book and its philosophies align with that Stoic philosophy that everything is either mind and matter.
Well, the idea would be that it sounds like there are. Well, no, I think it really just said that. I'm kind of mashing up yin and yang, John Chang's idea of yin and yang with the Stoic idea of pneuma, because John Chang's idea is that all things are made up essentially of two things, yin and yang, or matter and antimatter. And the Stoic idea is that all things are made up of pneuma, which is God.
Okay. So the Stoic philosophy doesn't necessarily contain
Duality.
A duality yin and yang thing.
Right. At least not in what I've read of it. Yeah.
Well, I think that if you interpreted what John Chang is saying about matter and antimatter through the lens that this book provides, that Rupert Spira provides, I think you would conclude that ultimate religious experience is the realization that all antimatter was a joke or a game or a bit. Everything ultimately was. But I mean, who's to say which one it would be? Is it matter or antimatter?
You'd have to have a word that's somewhere in between those two things, I guess.
Yeah, because that implies a separation. Just like, there's in real religious experience, there is no separation of anything from anything. So if you still think that there's two sides of the coin, then you're not there.
You haven't zoomed out enough.
Yeah. Well, zoom in one more, and keep going or whatever.
Yeah.
Because if things feel like, oh, some's matter and some's antimatter, it's like, well, that implies a separation. So that means you're still living in the fall. You're still living in distance from awareness, from universal awareness. If you think there's matter versus antimatter. So I don't know if John Chang's point was that reality really is fundamentally structured of part matter and part antimatter, or if his point was that it's useful to see that it seems that way in order to get yourself to a greater conclusion than that. I don't know what his intentions were, but I don't think the universe is fundamentally two-sided, and I don't think the yin-yang philosophy tries to make the point that the universe is fundamentally two-sided, but makes the point that, I already said that. Now I'm about to loop around and say the same thing.
That's okay.
So, and I don't know, I don't... I've never specifically studied the origins of the yin-yang symbol or philosophy.
Yeah.
That's just me spitballing on it.
Yeah.
And that's me spitballing on the yin-yang through my best The Nature of Consciousness by Rupert Spira inspired lens.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to look at the yin-yang philosophy through this magnifying glass of this book.
Yeah.
And explain what I see. And I might express a completely different opinion on the next episode.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to see it the way Rupert Spira would.
That's okay.
And that's what I love about doing this podcast is we can play with different ideas every week.
And I love that idea. I love talking about it. Good talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Evan, you got anything?
No.
Night school.
Night school.